Welcome to episode 172 of the Ski Podcast, and thanks for joining us, listener. Today, we're going to be finding out all about the famous Haute Route that takes you across the high mountains from Chamonix to Zermatt. Plus, we'll be looking in detail at Verbier, one of the stops along the way. Now, my name is Iain Martin. I'd like to introduce my guest today. Firstly, Katie Bamber. Hi, Katie. How are you?
Hi, very well, thanks.
Great to have you back on the show. You were last on the show in episode 168 when you were telling us about van life in the Alps, and thoroughly recommend that, listener, if you haven't listened to that. And for the first time on the show, we have Tristan Kennedy. Hi, Tristan.
Hi, Ian. Nice to be here.
It's great to have you both here. So one of the first questions I like to ask my guests is, when did you last ski or snowboard? And we were just chatting in the green room. I have a pretty sure I know what the answer is to this. But Katie, when were you last on snow?
It was last week, and I was in Jackson Hole in Wyoming.
Which is, I think you're probably going to win if there's a most spectacular place to have been skiing last. I've actually already read, you must have written and posted your piece very quickly. I'll put a link to it in the show notes, but you wrote an article for the Telegraph about it. How was that trip?
It was incredible. I mean, it's been quite lean on snow in the Alps and out in the States and across the whole of North America. It's just been wild. By the end of January, or near the end of January, Jackson had surpassed its snow totals from the season before, and it just hasn't stopped since. So that's 2 extra months of snow, and it's not quite got California's depths, which is just being hammered, but it's dry, so very nice.
Yeah, well, in some respects, the amount of snow they've had in California has almost been too much. Sometimes there is a question: can you have too much snow? I think they possibly have there, because I saw some pictures of people trying to dig out lifts and it looks impossible. But Jackson Hole definitely one for the bucket list. Tris, where are you calling in from just now, and when were you last on snow?
So I was last on snow yesterday. I'm actually in Switzerland at the moment. I'm in Champéry in the Hotel Suisse, which is run by a former Olympic skier, Camilla Berra, and her sister. And I'm here doing a story for Snow Magazine, which I work for a lot. I'm the editor of that. And yes, we've been here in Switzerland visiting various resorts for the past week, me and a filmer. Unfortunately, we've not had anything like as much snow as Katie had in Jackson. As anyone who's visited this part of the Alps this winter will know, it's not been a vintage snow year.
But I'm thinking your timing has worked out quite well, because shortly before you arrived, there would have been a good amount of snow. So conditions on piste are okay?
Yeah, conditions on piste are okay. I would say okay. Definitely, it was raining a little bit up the hill yesterday, so it could be better.
Okay, well, that's never so good. I will chip in. I also have been out on snow fairly recently. Last weekend, I was in Verbier, and I'm going to be discussing that in a bit more detail further down. But the conditions are excellent there. I know that that rain snow line that you were talking about has been going a little bit too high, let's say, and rain coming in. But I know that there is more snow due to come in this week. Tris?
Exactly. They said, I understand there's more snow on the way tomorrow, and in fact the freezing line will be going down to 800, they say, in this valley. So the village will be blanketed in snow after the weekend. So anyone visiting next week should have a lovely winter wonderland. We just didn't get lucky, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, it just hasn't been a very consistent season for snow in Europe. But, conditions are pretty good just now. We're going to come on to some snow reports a little bit later on. But just now, I just wanted to chip in and say I've got some good and bad news. The bad news is that the Ski Podcast will not be retaining the Best Winter Sports podcast this year. But the good news is that's only because the Sports Podcast Awards have discontinued that particular category. And we have actually been shortlisted in the Best Wilderness Podcast category. So, listener, if you like the Ski Podcast and you enjoy listening to us, can I please recommend and ask you to go to the sportspodcastawards.com. Just log in, go to the wilderness category and vote for us. I'd really appreciate that. When we won that category last year, Best Winter Sports Podcast, it was really exciting for me, and it really was a reward for all the work I put in. So if you want to go along to sportspodcastawards.com and just vote for us, it'll take a couple of minutes of your time. Now, the Ski Podcast is sponsored by Les Trois Vallées. It's the largest ski area in the world. They have quite a lot of events coming up as we near the end of the season. There's an event called Winter Legacy going on in Courchevel. That's organised by Alexis Pantereau, and you can listen to the interview I did with him if you look through our back catalogue. The AJ Bell Challenge is coming up in Val Thorens towards the end of April. If you track back to episode 98, you can hear me chatting with Emily Sarsfield about that. But their biggest event of the season is the Les Trois Vallées Enduro, and that is coming up imminently. And so I actually called up Tom Herbst and Olivier Desorti, who's head of Les Trois Vallées, and we had a little chat about that event. Well, I'm delighted this morning to be welcoming a couple of special guests who are going to be telling us about Les Trois Vallées Enduro, which is a big event that takes place in Les Trois Vallées next Sunday on the 2nd of April. I'm joined today by Olivier Desorti, who is Director of Les Trois Vallées Association. Hi, Olivier, how are you?
Hi, I'm okay.
Excellent. And we're also joined by Tom Herbst, who works for Les Trois Vallées in London and is a previous competitor in the event. Hi, Tom.
Good morning, Ian.
Now, Olivier, I'd like to start off with you. The Enduro is the big event in Les Trois Vallées during the season. I wondered if you could give us an idea what it is, what the concept is and what the different elements are.
Yes, okay. So the Three Valley Enduro started in 2005, so that's the 19th edition. It's more or less the biggest ski amateur rendezvous in France. So it's very huge. We have usually more than 1,000 skiers who are participating, and they can register on our website, and they form teams of 3 people. We have 3 categories: families, so it's very much dedicated to families because it's very much fun. So we have families, professionals, or amateur if you come with some friends. So briefly, you ski one day, a complete day, because it's quite huge. A complete day in the 3 valleys. For this 3 Valley Enduro, we've got 10 or 12 stages or challenges in the 3 valleys. And so you go from Courchevel to Maribel to Les Menuires and to Val Thorens with lots of different stages to do.
I understood that it covered the whole of the Trois Vallées and you're going into different resorts. How does it work on the day itself? Can you start from any particular resort, or do you need to start from a place in a particular resort?
No, it's okay. You can start from wherever you want, and that's one of the biggest advantage of the 3 valleys, because from any resort you start from, you can see that it's very easy to go on ski to another resort. So from Courchevel until Orel, you can start from wherever you want. Yeah.
And therefore you can do the elements, the different parts of the competition in any order as well, can you?
Yeah, and it's very funny. I just tell you the four new stages we have, Iain, if you don't mind. So, and we've got one in Courchevel, a new one, which is called Kilomètre Lancé. So briefly, you go as fast as possible. Then in Maribel, we've got also a brand new challenge, because it's on the slope of the championship on the Roc de Fer. So it's called Verbier Roc de Fer. And also in Les Menuires, we've got the new bump on La Masse. La Masse, it's an extraordinary part of Les Trois Vallées where you can ski. So that's new also. And in Val Thorens, a new one also on Le Bord. That's the sports center, which is in the center of Val Thorens. And there you can try ski mountaineering this year. And we've got lots of other stages, because this year we have 12 stages, which is very much. So you've got to be in a good shape to do all this.
Right, okay. Regular listeners to the show will know Le Bord, because I went there and had a look at it just before Christmas. So I'll have to look up the episode and put that into the show notes. And so I know you're saying you need to be fit, but it is generally, the point of it is it's a fun event. It's something to take part in.
Yeah, it's important for us. The most important for us is not so much the competition, but a fun day for all the skiers, and that's it. And we are very famous for that. And then the one who are winning, they get a very, very, very good gift, because they win Salomon skis. That's our partner. So we've got 36 pairs of ski to offer to the winners, but also for those who don't win, they can win ski passes for next year, Iain, or ski mask or other gift. And the best gift, you know what it is, Iain?
Is it going to be cheese?
No, you've got some cheese. Yes, you're right. But the best gift, and that's a tombola, as we say. I mean, it's not especially the winners tombola, and the best gift is one stay week in the Three Valleys for next year with accommodation and ski passes and transfers. So that's the best you can have.
Brilliant. Well, it sounds excellent. Now, we do have the advantage of having Tom with us today. He's, I think you're taking part on Sunday, and you have taken part in the Enduro before. When you did it, Tom, where did you start from? And Olivier mentioned, you need to be quite fit. How tiring was that day?
Yeah, so I did it in just before COVID in 2019, and we started off in Maribel, and we went from there. The day that we did it, it was actually quite tricky because it was quite foggy on the day. But a few things to point out to people is, the Enduro is great for parents thinking of what to do with the kids at Easter, or if you're going as a group to the Three Valleys system with your friends. Most of us, when we go on our 1 or 2 week ski holidays, we don't really get a chance to do ski challenges in a fun race format. And the Enduro is all about having fun. It's as competitive as you want to make it. What kind of level of skier do you need to be? I would say if you can ski a red piste, you're going to be absolutely fine. You don't have to do all the stages, actually. You score points when you do the stages. And as Olivier has mentioned, they're all around the whole Three Valleys system, which is 600 kilometers of run. So you're not timed between the stages. It's only when you get there, so you don't have to kind of hoon around between all the different 12 challenges. You're only timed when you get there. The other thing is, you get a free lunch as part of your ticket price.
They say there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Ticket price. It's not very much. If you book before March the 30th, it's 29 euros to do it. You get a bib. You name your team. We bullishly went for Team GB. We didn't do very well, mainly because I had a couple of slow bods in my group. But it didn't really matter. The point was taking part. You have to wear a helmet. When you stop at lunch, and there's a lunch in Maribel and there's a barbecue in Val Thorens this year, you're going to see screens with your team name and your time. So it's fun to see where you're scoring. But there you go. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward this year to doing the biathlon, which is like an air rifle shooting thing, a bit like in the Olympics. That was a lot of fun. Border cross is a good laugh as well. You're all going down together, jostling down the slopes. Can't recommend it enough. Come and give it a go.
That's great. And as it goes, I have a feeling that one of the people that you're doing it with this weekend is a journalist called Catherine Murphy. Is that right?
Yes, I'm doing it with Catherine, and I'm doing it with a couple of other journalists as well. We're going to be out at the group of 3. Yeah.
The reason I say that is I have her scheduled to be on the next episode of the podcast, which we're recording next week. So we'll be able to chat to her and find out what she thought. And whether you held her back, Tom.
It's just not possible. It's not possible.
Cool. That's brilliant, guys. Thank you very much, and have a great time this weekend at the Three Valleys Enduro.
Thanks, Iain.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye.
So I mentioned earlier we have some snow reports. Let's start off in Courchevel, see what conditions are going to be having for the Trois Vallées Enduro. We've got Alex Irwin from 150 Days of Winter reporting from Courchevel. We've also got Betony Garner telling us what the latest conditions are in Courmayeur. And although this was recorded a little while ago, Simon Burgess, who's reported for us on several occasions, actually skied up in Yad Moss in England not so long ago, so I thought it's still good to have a listen to what it's like skiing in England.
Hi Iain, Alex from 150 Days of Winter with a snow report from Courchevel and the Three Valleys. Last week saw a much needed fall of snow revitalising the bare piste. A recent run down the Combe de Ville Piste in Mirabel revealed some great snow even for the end of March. After a spot of rain today, another batch of snow is forecast for Sunday as the freezing level drops down the valley. If it carries on like this with little regular storms, there will be plenty of snow for April and the end of season. So get out there early for first lifts and enjoy the snow before it gets heavy in the afternoon, and you can do some serious après-ski in the sunshine. While I put down my glass of rosé, I wish you all a good end of season. If you get bored, feel free to peruse my YouTube channel. Ciao.
Hi Ian, it's Betony sending you a snow report from Courmayeur in Italy. So today, Wednesday, was a very spring-like day, but I've got to say Courmayeur have done a great job with their piste, and all the pistes we skied were skiing really well, but a bit slushy by the end of the afternoon, but all morning and even into lunchtime, they were most of them were really great, and there was even a little bit of kind of spring powder up in the Eula Arp area. So yeah, it's not bad, and you can actually ski all the way down to the bottom list at Dolon, which I was surprised about, but they've got a strip of white snow down to the bottom. And it looks like there's some snow forecast at the weekend. It's hard to say at the moment where the snow rain limit will be, but I think there will definitely be a bit of fresh high up. And yeah, it's going to keep skiing well, I think, for the next few weeks till the end of the season. So if you're heading to Courmayeur, I think it's a great bet. And yeah, enjoy. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Hi Ian, Simon here, reporting on the recent snowfall across the north of England. Over the past few days, Rays, Allen Heads and Yad Moss have all been open. I was fortunate to get to Yad Moss on the 11th of March, where the tow ran until 5 p.m. The snow was good in parts, patchy in others, and there was some decent wind-blown powder to be found. Unfortunately, the snow has not lasted, and although the tow will run today, conditions are far from favourable. Hopefully we'll get more snow and a few more days on the tow this winter, but for now, that is all.
Hi Ian, Sian here from the Haute Pyrenees, calling in with a snow report. Most stuff around here is close. I'm in Lucent-Sauveur, we've got 4 resorts relatively close. Gavani, Luz-Ardiden, Grand Tourmalet, which includes the Pic du Midi, and Courchevel. Gavani and Luz-Ardiden have now closed. Grand Tourmalet is open until the 2nd of April. And Courchevel which is a nice little north-facing bowl, so it keeps the snow well. They are open until the 23rd of April. So anyone looking for a bit of spring skiing can sort of head over there. Anyway, so last week coming up for Grand Tourmalet. I'm not sure it'll be great. They're announcing a bit of snow on Sunday, so I'm planning to head out for a ski on Monday. Conditions up high, I think, are all right. Spring skiing, best to get out in the morning. Nice and easy end of season. Okay, have a good day. Bye.
I mentioned a little bit earlier that I was out in Verbier last weekend, and that was such a great trip. Firstly, as listeners know, I like to travel by train. So I went out by train, and one of the reasons I picked Verbier is because of that link between where the train comes in Le Chable. You can literally just walk across the road and then catch the gondola up to a resort. And so, that final section, sometimes you're going to some resorts a bit more complicated if you're going to let's say Val d'Isère from Bourg-Saint-Maurice, or you're going to Mirabel, Courchevel from Moutier. But here, you can just go all the way up into a resort without a problem at all. And I've blogged about that on Ski Flight Free. I'll put a link into it in the show notes, and I've done a little video about it. There was quite a lot of fresh snow in the build-up to me being there. I got there on the Thursday, and they had, as you'll hear a bit later on, 175 centimetres of fresh snow in the previous week. So I went into Intersport, Philippe Roux Intersport in the centre of town there, and I asked them for something pretty wide underfoot. And they gave me some Rossignol BlackOps Sender skis, which I had a little check with Al, and I'll put a link to his review in there. That's Al Morgan from Ski Kit Info. They were absolutely fantastic. 187 centimeters long, 106 underfoot, and they were just what I needed for the type of skiing that we were doing, which I was very lucky. I was actually with a bunch of friends who was celebrating a 50th birthday. It wasn't a press trip, quite unusually for one of my trips to the Alps. So I was kind of like, off the clock, so to speak, and lucky enough to go out with a couple of people and do some really good off-piste. But the background to that is that huge amount of snow that came down did present some very dangerous conditions. And the day I arrived on the Wednesday, I didn't have the opportunity to ski because I got in quite late. But there were some serious avalanches that day, and unfortunately, one fatality. I'll put a link to a little video of one of those avalanches. But I think everyone who's thinking about going backcountry hopefully takes the precautions. We had some superb skiing and went straight out there. Robin, who's reported for us from Verbier before and given us several snow reports. I'd never actually skied with him before. We talked over the phone. But he didn't really know what kind of skier I was. But he very kindly let me join him and one of his friends, Richard. You could tell they were testing me out on the first run, where they said, this is going to be our warm-up run. And it was quite a steep off-piste run. But I guess they wanted to kind of check whether it was going to work out. But we had a brilliant day skiing all over the backcountry. So I asked Robin afterwards about Verbier's kind of position as a destination for off-piste skiing. So let's have a listen to that. Right, we're sitting here in the 1936 restaurant in Verbier. I'm enjoying a large demi-panache, and I reckon I've earned it because I've been incredibly fortunate to be taken out today by Robin Shah. Some of you will recognise his voice because he's given us a number of snow reports from Verbier. Hi, Robin. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Ian.
I really want to thank you for taking me out today. I mean, we have just skied so much off-piste around Verbier. I feel like I've covered a lot of ground, but there is something about off-piste, backcountry in Verbier. It's that kind of resort, isn't it?
Yeah, Verbier is known for its off-piste, and if I'm honest with you, it is fabulous for its off-piste. I wouldn't necessarily recommend piste skiers to come here, but if you love lift-served off-piste, then I can't think of anywhere better to ski.
I think that was one of, when we were talking on one of the chairlifts earlier, we were talking about lift-serve off-piste versus off-piste, and you were saying, if you want to do that comparison with Chamonix, it's so much better here in Verbier in terms of what you can reach more easily.
Yeah, it's the Verbier area is really well connected. So with the three big mountains, so Atala, Montgelais and Montfort, you've got the itineraries which are controlled as well, so give you a bit of safety if you're not so experienced. And then for those who are more experienced, there are just countless different routes that you can get. As you get more experience, you find trickier routes to get into, routes which maybe a little bit steeper, and just as you get more experienced, you can just keep on finding new places.
And I think one of the great things about it, I mean, we've covered lots of different type of terrain today, but there is that mix. You were showing me a couple of runs there, which are a great way to start someone off if they've never skied powder before. Here's a little playground that you can test yourself on before you build yourself up to those steeper and slightly harder to access areas.
Yeah, we skied mini golf. I was telling you, it's my kid's favourite. Straight off, one of the few one of the few pommel lifts in Verbier. Right up at Col de Gentiane at 2,900 metres. The snow was fantastic up there, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You've only got it's a small area, but there's lips to jump off. There's deep snow there. It's super safe. I've been taking my kids there since they were 4 or 5. What a great place to learn to ski in powder.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we skied such a huge area today. I couldn't really think back and say exactly where they were. We obviously had a mix of conditions. Some of it was getting a little bit crusty because it's quite warm today. Yeah. But those early runs that we did in perfect powder, and we're one day after effectively everything opened up yesterday. I mean, they were just perfect.
Yeah. I mean, it's, we're back half of March now, so the sun is strong. So as soon as the sun gets on, south-facing stuff, it does get, gets kissed. But the north-facing stuff here at altitude stays good for quite a while. So we still, even though people have been skiing it the last couple of days, yesterday was like a bluebird day, and Verbier gets well skied on a bluebird day, right? But we could still go out, find almost untracked spots. We had to work a little bit for them, but we found some nice untracked.
You mentioned yesterday was a bluebird day. I mean, I've got to bring it up. I mean, we saw a lot of avalanches that were set off yesterday, and my understanding was that there was certainly at least one fatality, some injuries. Obviously, in terms of how you choose the different routes, you guess you put a lot of thinking into that.
Yeah. I think that's something that you learn with experience, particularly when you know an area. You see where the avalanches are, and also you see where the avalanches are when the storms come in from different directions, right? So today, for example, we talked about we've had a lot of snow, right? We've had like 175 centimeters of snow in the last 7 days on a base which had been pretty dry for about 3 or 4 weeks. So that means there's lots of like facets, weak layers in the snow, and then there's a ton of snow on top of that. And where we saw those avalanches, we saw them on the kind of north faces, and we saw them on the places where the wind had blown loads of snow in there. So when we were skiing today, we were basically looking, we were staying off those faces, right? And we could see where the avalanches were, and so with your experience, you know where the avalanches go depending on the winds and the storms, etc. And then you're just trying to choose areas where you really can minimize the risk. There is still always risk, right? So then what do? You make sure you go one by one. You make sure everybody's equipped. You make sure at the top you decide which route are we going to take? Where's a safe place to stop on the way down? So there's a number of things that you've got to think about, and you've got to make sure your groups is ready. You're always trying to minimize the risk.
Cool. Well, I've got to say, Robin, I've had like a fantastic morning. I would never have done the sort of skiing that we did today if it wasn't for you. So thanks very much for taking me and sharing your knowledge of all the great backcountry and off-piste that Verbier has to offer.
Ian, it was a pleasure. You were... I didn't know what to expect when you arrived. I thought, here's this guy coming out from the UK. He told me I'm hiring some skis. I thought this is not a good sign. And so my mate Rich whispered in my ear, well, we better do a practice run on the Lac de Vaux Ridge. And after I saw you do the first couple of turns, I thought we're going to have a good day. This guy can ski. So very good. It was a pleasure skiing with you. I really
Excellent.
enjoyed it.
Thanks very much. So Verbier, evidently, I think most people know, it really is just an off-piste backcountry playground. There are so many different descents there, whether you're looking for big pitches or whether you're looking for steeps. I don't think Robin mentioned it there. One of the things we skied was something called a Three Fingers couloir, which comes down from Atlas, which is definitely one of the steepest sections I've ever been down before. When we were near the top, Robin said to me, how good's your side slipping? And I thought, that seems like a strange question to be asking, but actually, wow. I mean, we went down this couloir, which was marginally wider than the length of our skis. And it was really pretty thrilling. I had a brilliant time. And the next day, I had the opportunity to ski with Warren Smith, who, despite knowing him for 20 years, it's the first time we've ever gone skiing together. And even a couple of days after that fresh snow, he used his knowledge of Verbier to sniff out some fresh powder. We skied just past the Cabane de Tortin, which is being remade at the moment. So I had a little chat with Warren as well. Well, I'm sitting here in a gondola on our way back up with Warren Smith from the Warren Smith Ski Academy in Verbier. And very kindly, we still managed to find some fresh powder 2, 3, 4 days after the last fresh snow. And it really just has impressed upon me, Verbier is such an off-piste backcountry resort. I mean, what do you think gives it that reputation?
I think it's had a few different factors. Like back in the day, the guys here in the 70s, like the John Faulkners and Marco doing pictures with him, and they brought a certain, I think, vibe and an energy to the place, which attracted other free skiers. So there's free skiers themselves have come here, but they've also free skiers have come here obviously because of the terrain as well. So there's a few factors in it. And when you look at Verbier, you've got 400 kilometres of really good, the Four Valleys, 400 kilometres of really good skiing, but you've got about 400 kilometres off-piste. And when you look at those piste maps and you really sort of scale out, when you look over the back of Montfort, the bowls around, Gentiane and all the areas around Montfort, it's quite an incredible place. But also, you can tour up to some areas within no time and find some fantastic, really quiet spots, sometimes even touring over towards Fionnay,
when we were up at Montfort earlier, looking at the magnificent view from there, and way over on the far side, you pointed out some tracks for a big, I guess must have been a glacier or something that people were going up to come back down again.
Yeah, there was a tour but people made to get over to the other side of Montfort to Wings of Icarus, and it's a really popular one. And it's quite early in the day in a way to put those tracks in because of a lot of things sliding. So
we've seen a huge number of slides, that's for sure. But that's really interesting, that ratio you're talking about of backcountry to piste. That's really what Verbier has to offer, and I really appreciate you showing me around and showing a bit more of it.
Oh mate, we've got the goods.
Thanks a lot, Warren.
No worries, mate.
So it's been quite a long time since I've been to Verbier, and I guess a few things struck me. Backcountry skiing, amazing. It's I go to Zermatt reasonably often. It's quite an expensive place. Verbier is pretty expensive as well, and like I say, this wasn't a press trip. So I did. You just sense that sort of wealth all over the place when you're there. Have you sort of noticed that before on previous trips, Tristan?
Yeah, I think the thing that I always remember about Verbier is it's the only ski resort I've ever been to where one of the ski schools is sponsored by a hedge fund. I can't remember which ski school it is, but they have Aberdeen Asset Management across the back of their jacket, and I think that kind of tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah, and actually up on the mountain itself, lots of resorts have like a skier board across and things like this. The skier board across in Verbier is sponsored by an international school in Verbier. So it might just be that if you happen to be skiing there, you are considering sending your children to an international school, or I think a baccalaureate option, then that's there for you too. What about you, Katie? You've been to Verbier before, I take it?
I have, yeah. I've been maybe 2 or 3 times, and each time I've been just by bad luck, and I think it just speaks about the terrain there, which is insane, obviously insanely good, but each time I've been I've lost a member of group to like an ACL or a broken shoulder or something.
Okay, and what about the kind of off-piste? I don't mean the backcountry side of things. I mean the resort itself and the feel in the resort. It certainly changed a lot from when I was there, when I was a season worker. Like a lot of resorts, I guess, there's probably fewer season worker bars, but the après is still pretty good there, I thought.
I'm always interested by Verbier because you're right, it is very wealthy, but because of the incredible backcountry terrain, you also get really serious skiers there. So I've got a friend who likes to divide resorts up into he says they're either Gore-Tex resorts or they're fur resorts. And he puts Verbier in the Gore-Tex resort category because despite the sort of wealth that you were talking about, Iain, this incredible terrain attracts really, really kind of serious skiers. And that spills over into the après kind of scene. So if you go to the Bar Montfort, it costs you a lot to drink there. But the vibe is kind of serious skier vibe, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'd back that up for sure. Based on the last few years I've done of skiing, and I haven't skied in Chamonix much recently, but the overall quality of skier that I saw, there's some really, really good skiers out there. I mean, it's been a while since I've been in a resort and I've just been going up a chairlift and watching multiple people backflipping off cliffs. It doesn't normally happen. And it is the destination for the Freeride World Tour finals. They're actually coming up this weekend as we're recording now, and I'm hoping to have a feature on it in the next episode. That's on the very famous Bec de Ross. It's going to depend a little bit on the snow as to whether or not they're going to be able to do that on Saturday as planned. But yeah, there are some extremely good skiers there, and I love that option of Gore-Tex or fur. I'm already thinking in my mind where I'd categorize other resorts. You've got to eat out somewhere. We were in South Coast, and I did eat in some really, really nice restaurants. As I mentioned, we were on a 50th kind of weekend with quite a lot of other families from Brighton. And I ate in two, which I definitely go back to. One called Le Rouge and one called La Nonna in the centre of town. Have either of you been to either of those?
Is that the one with some good après before it gets to nice evening time?
For sure. I mean, they often have DJs there. I did meet one of the DJs called Nico who plays there on a regular basis. Actually, theoretically, you can ski there as well. It's at the bottom of one of the slopes. But the food in both of those two places was excellent. And really, once you get over, I think when Jim and I were on the show together, we often used to start referring to Swiss francs as just chuffs. If you start, calculating the whole time how much everything is costing you and converting it back into sterling, then it can seem very expensive. But if you just think of everything as being chuffs, then it diminishes it a little bit and it doesn't feel so bad. But I really enjoyed eating out both of those two places, particularly La Nonna, which is right in the centre of town there, and the après. Yeah, I did go to Bar Montfort, which is good. Went to Fer à Cheval, and you're right, they did have that kind of après ski season worker kind of atmosphere that I guess you'd probably struggle to find in somewhere like Courchevel 1850 these days.
That kind of après season worker thing definitely feels more pronounced around the Freeride World Tour weekend. Like when you have all those incredible skiers and snowboarders rolling into town, that's a really incredible vibe. And yes, it's also an incredible contest to watch live. I think there's a lot of freestyle these days, can get a bit bamboozling. A lot of it's actually quite confusing to the sort of untrained eye, like whether someone's spinning a 12 or a 1400 it can be quite hard to follow. But watching the best backcountry skiers and snowboarders in the world tear down that Bec de Ross face is something that I think everyone can understand. It's really kind of visceral, and bloody hell, they go fast. Like it's completely insane. The backflips off the cliffs is one thing, but just the sheer speed that they take those lines is nuts.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to watching that. I don't think this podcast will get published until Monday, so it may have happened. But looking at the weather report, I think it could be that it gets deferred to Tuesday. We'll see. They obviously need to be very mindful of the situation with the new snow and possible avalanches out there. But either way, Verbier, fantastic trip. I do have an idea that I'd like to go back there again and see if I could, write an article on how you ski Verbier on a budget, possibly stay in Le Chable or something like that. But I'll tackle that one in due course. Now, Verbier is actually fits in with our next section quite well because it is one of the stops on the Haute Route. And the Haute Route, listener, if you're not familiar with it, it's basically a high mountain ski touring route. You could walk it in summer that goes from Chamonix to Zermatt. I think the first ski crossing was made in 1903. So it's been going for over 100 years. And I particularly wanted to have both Katie and Tristan on the podcast this time round because they both had experience of it in different ways. I'd like to start off with yourself, Katie, because you mentioned when you were last on in episode 168 that you did do the Haute Route. And that was last season, is that right?
That's it, mid-April 2022.
Right. And so it was mid-April and you did Chamonix to Zermatt, because everything I read about it does say Chamonix to Zermatt. Do people ever go Zermatt to Chamonix?
I believe they did. People asked me which way round I did it. And as I was finishing and coming into Zermatt, you can see the PDG setting up, which happens every other year. And they were all training, setting off. So they do it the other way, but that's obviously much more extreme than the 4 or 5 day classic Haute Route Verbier.
For sure. And PDG, just for the benefit of the listener who might not know, is a Patrouille de Glacier, which is a race that goes from Verbier to Zermatt. You tend to do it in pairs. You go through the night. I know a few people who've done it. It's on my list. Got to find someone. If you're a listener, you fancy teaming up to do that. That's one to add to my list at some point. And Katie, so you went in mid-April. I've got a lot of questions about it. I know, Tristan, I'm going to bring you in as well because you've looked at some different variants. But firstly, how long does it take to do that, Katie?
Well, actually, I did start in Verbier in the end. So it was meant to be a 5-dayer. And last winter was a bit like this winter. It was a bit, short of snow and a bit warm early on in spring. So I was hanging around in Chamonix for a few days when luckily there was an amazing snowstorm, which dropped 1.5 meters maybe up high. So we had a few rest days and, where the mountain could settle. And then there happened to be a fire in our first hut. I think it was the Trient hut, a miniature fire, but it basically was off for just that one night. So we did some Chamonix skiing and then ended up driving to Verbier and setting out from there.
Would it only be 6 days, 5 nights, something like that?
That's it. Yeah. I did mine with a kind of it's not a tour operator. It's just a company in Chamonix that guides you through it. And they normally take 6 days. And that's 1 or 2 days in Chamonix, kind of testing your skills and making sure you're ready. And
Tris, can I come to you? I don't think, like Katie, you haven't done the full Haute Route, but you've done different kind of variants around there. Yeah. What's your experience?
So I did something for a story for the Telegraph at a similar time to Katie. I was there early May last year, and this was something that they were launching as a new Haute Route variant. So there are various variants, like the reverse one, Zermatt Chamonix is one that Katie was just talking about. There are also sort of various ways you can go around the Grand Combin. I think there's a sort of classic and there's the historic, and there's one, because normally I think the classic, you would end up driving a section between after your first days down from Chamonix to Verbier anyway. Is that right, Katie?
Yeah, that's it.
So anyway, there's all these different variants, but it's been about 40 or 50 years since someone launched a new one and said, this is a variant of the Haute Route. So the one I did was put together by the Guide de Verbier in collaboration with guides from the Grand Pays de Saint-Bernard and the Vallées d'Aosta in Italy. And it was essentially taking a lot of the hardest pitches of the classic Haute Route and putting them in a big loop around, kind of pretty much all around the Grand Combin, which is the peak that sort of sits above Verbier, to create a new 6-day Haute Route. So it was 6 days, 5 nights, and according to our guide, at least, was gnarlier than the sort of traditional Haute Route. That's what he was pitching us on. It was certainly hard work.
Well, okay. I mean, that's quite interesting. You mentioned hard work, so that brings me on to another one of my questions. Katie, how difficult is it? Like on the two sides, technically and physically, how fit do you need to be and what kind of skills do you need?
You do need a good level of fitness, but it kind of surprised me what the challenges were going to be on the Haute Route. I mean, I was warned and told that it's much less skiing than you think it's going to be. So I'm interested in Tristan's version because there's very little ski descents. And I don't know if that was just the year I did it and there was, not as much snow. And it's a traverse, right? So you're basically just, you head up high and then it's kind of across. You need fitness and you need to enjoy touring, but it's a different kind of fitness. It's endurance. Yeah.
I would absolutely agree with that. So I'm actually a snowboarder for my sins. I never learned to ski. So I was doing it on a split board with a photographer friend of mine, Dan Medhurst, who is also a split boarder. And I think the guide was slightly surprised when we rocked up, saying we were going to do it on our split boards. I quite like touring uphill. Dan, the photographer, goes uphill so that he can get to fresh descents. And he was a little bit shocked that there was a lot of uphill and a lot of flat. And some amazing descents. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were a couple of kind of 1,000-meter plus pitches where we were riding down all in one long go. But I'd agree with Katie 100% that you have to enjoy touring. But then you sort of should anyway, because touring is 90% going uphill, isn't it? I mean, for every hour you go uphill, you get 3 minutes coming down if you're lucky.
I think one thing that I was surprised at is I've done a lot of touring before and kind of touring, staying in huts before, maybe 2 days, but not multi-day beyond that. But I'd never really done glacier touring. And I think that was the biggest surprise, that the Haute Route is high risk because it's glaciers. And again, it was a low snow year, so the crevasses were open and they were everywhere. It's pretty spooky up there because you can see all the crevasses again. I guess it's, less scary when you can't see them, but it's a completely different kind of touring. You're kind of roped up for sections, and the dangers are different.
Yeah, definitely agree on the sort of danger. The crevasses are also, what struck me was just spectacular. I think I was watching partly through the lens of Dan's camera as well, and watching him just get excited about the light, early morning light on the ice. I assume you would have done the same, Katie. You sort of leave the huts at 4 a.m. some days just to make sure you're at the next hut before the snow starts getting soft and unsafe. And so you have like head torches playing on the blue ice, and then the early morning, the dawn kind of alpenglow coming over the glaciers, and you're right there. You're right kind of next to these huge walls of ice. It's scary, but also super cool.
That is great. I'm getting so many questions coming through my mind as the two of you are talking. You mentioned, I think, so people kind of understand, you do tend to start very early in the day and finish pretty early in the day as well. So you can be arriving at the next refuge or your next night's accommodation around lunchtime, right?
Yeah, some days I think our first day we started out at 7 and then it went back an hour each day because it really feels like a race against the sun. Not only because of snow quality, and I guess the risk gets higher, but my lasting memory is, first of all, the views, because you really are at the top of the world. And the second is just how hot it is. It feels kind of like you're melting from the inside. I burnt the top of my hands one day and they still haven't really got their feeling back.
Right. Okay. But this is because you're going uphill, right? So you're working hard, and you might be at altitude, but there's nothing between you and the sun. It's beating down on you, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So set off early and try and stay in the shadow and in the shade, because I think at 9:30 that's when it starts to get seriously hot.
Tris?
But then you have these lovely. What I remember is you have these lovely long afternoons where you get to the hut and you've done a massive workout, like usually. Close on sort of 2,000 vertical meters, and it's only kind of 2 p.m. and then you eat a leisurely lunch and sit on a terrace, trying to protect yourself from the sun, I suppose. Certainly wearing sun cream and sun hat, but also just soaking it up and enjoying that kind of, I guess it's the endorphin rush, isn't it? After you've done sort of exercise. There were days where we'd get to the hut and I felt like I'd run a half marathon that morning. It was a similar kind of vibe.
Yeah, but it's glorious, isn't it? That's the payoff to me. I love the exercise side of things. Yeah, the descents are great, but it's spending that time in the high mountain where it's quiet. You're away from the lift system. You can just, enjoy the views. And just to kind of clarify, because I know different routes and things do it in different ways, but the actual accommodation where you're staying overnight might be useful to give people an idea of how refuges work. Okay,
yeah. Well, like I said, I've stayed at kind of mountain refuges before, or sometimes you can kind of do a little day tour out from a resort and eat at them. But these ones, I stayed at the Praflerie and then the Dies and then Vignette, which are all pretty famous ones. And they're seriously remote outposts. I can't understand how they're built. One of them, is it the Vignette? It's essentially on this enormous cliff. It's kind of built on a ridgeline. The most beautiful place I've ever been. So those afternoons when you get there before lunch and you spend all day like playing cards or reading and sitting in the sun are just seriously beautiful.
And generally the way that they work is that, is dorm accommodation, isn't it? It's pretty basic. If you're used to your 5-star accommodation, this probably is going to be a bit of a shock for you in that respect. And although food is provided, typically, depending what refuge you're staying at, there's no choice on the menu. You get what you're given, right?
But the food, in my experience, was generally excellent. Maybe it's just that you've worked at such a hunger that anything would taste good. But I think genuinely really, really tasty. The dorm accommodation, obviously, yes, if you're used to staying in your own hotel room, takes some getting used to. It does give it a bit of atmosphere. You get chatting to people very easily over dinner. You tend to eat at sort of long tables. And that's quite nice. And you're usually, you sort of compare notes on what exactly it is you're doing and that kind of thing. There's also a sort of general atmosphere of fug and smell because quite a lot of these refuges don't have showers. we stayed in one that didn't even have running water. They had snow melt, so even the water, the water supply was sort of limited. So yes, there's that to put up with, and you're sharing a room obviously with a bunch of strangers. So the two things that I wish someone had told me before I went was make sure your bag is as light as possible, because like Katie said, it's super sweaty and hot and hard work. And two, make sure there's earplugs in your bag, because someone is guaranteed to snore in your refuge dorm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point about weight. I was going to come on to the type of equipment that you need. Once, I can't remember what episode it was, but when we had Alan Morgan from Ski Kit Info on the podcast before, I think the actual equation that he explained to me is that 1 kilogram on your feet is worth 5 kilograms on your back. So although it's kind of important to try and make sure that you don't have, too much heavy stuff in your backpack itself, the equipment that you're using for touring and for going uphill is going to make a lot of difference. And I'm guessing, perhaps, I'm not an expert in this, that if you're on a split board, they're probably heavier than regular skis, touring skis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, unfortunately, they've yet to work out how to make split boards as light as touring skis.
Katie, were you going for super light touring equipment then on your trip?
I was going, I did go for super light. I was surprised at how much equipment you needed. And I actually rented the entire lot, apart from boots, from the Intersport in the centre of Chamonix. It's just got everything. So you have to buy your carabiner, obviously, because that's, got to be like fresh and safe, and they can't insure you against that. But everything else you can get from Intersport, which is great.
Okay, and did you have crampons and need to use crampons at all?
Yeah, so we had boot crampons and ski crampons, both of which we used. I think the only thing I didn't use that I brought was an ice screw, which is lucky because I didn't fall in a crevasse.
Right, okay.
Other than that, I wish I bought less snacks and less clothes, because, as Tristan said, the hearts are grotty and you don't change your t-shirt at the end of the day. So
I don't know whether this is oversharing, but I did the 6 days with 3 pairs of pants, 3 pairs of socks, and 2 base layers. And you basically get to the hut, wash your 1 base layer that you've been wearing that day in whatever water there is, put on the clean one, and then dry it in the sun, and then sort of change like that. The guide, for reference, scoffed at that amount of spare clothing, because he did the whole thing with 2 pairs of socks, a single pair of pants, and a single base layer. So that is apparently how the pros do it. They just smell.
Yeah, well, that fug that you're talking about that you get in the refuges is definitely noticeable. At least you can spend a lot of your time outdoors. But even at the top of the mountain, you mentioned those early starts. I mean, people tend to go to bed pretty early on. I know you said people are snoring, so you got your headphones, your earplugs in. But I think that normally by sort of 8, 9 o'clock, most people are kind of settling down.
that was my favorite part of the whole thing, actually, the kind of camaraderie you get in the huts that grows each night, because you tend to see the same people on the same route at each hut. Like, to make sweeping generalizations, it's, you get your different countries kind of in different groups. And there was a lot of Icelanders on the Haute Route I went on who are noisy, lots of fun, invite you in for wine and teaching you how to play, like, their version of whist and stuff. So these were normally the latest, but yeah, earlier than 9, I think I kind of, got into the dormitory way before that.
Yeah, and what about, you mentioned, you can be traveling at roughly the same rate as other groups. It's one of the things I've noticed before. This is when I was ski touring in Morocco. There are a lot of different people staying in the refuge, but people had different goals for the next day. And, we were going skiing in, different areas, but they were all going to summit Mount Tubkal. And they were getting up extraordinarily early, which we just didn't really need. And I guess there's probably some people, you said you were getting a bit earlier every day. But that's one of the things when you're in a dorm and there's other people, who are working on a slightly different timetable from you. Did you get any of that at all, Tris?
Yeah, I mean, that's another excellent reason to bring earplugs, because people are getting up, going for, going to the toilet in the night, but also, yes, waking up at different times and clattering around, dropping their ice axe on the floor or whatever. So if you do have a slightly later departure time, which actually we didn't. I think the guide pushed our departure time back every day as well, to the point where we were waking up at 3:30 for a 4 a.m. departure. But yes, you want to make sure that if you can sleep in, you have the earplugs to be able to do so.
And Katie, did you have people like that get some really early starters?
Yeah, definitely. In the huts that I went on, the more keen people. It's people who put Gore-Tex on in dormitories of 30 people and are swishing about the dormitory, or like testing zips. I don't know if they're like waxing them or something, but it sounds like fireworks at 3:30 a.m.
Yeah,
yes,
when you're trying to sleep. Well, I find this so interesting. I haven't done it. Lots of people I speak to, they're really surprised I've never done this sort of thing before. I've kind of run around, done the Tour de Mont Blanc and things like that. But, I'd love to do the Haute Route. So that's another one. You've already added like Jackson Hole on my list. And now we have the Haute Route on my list as well. I want to get back to Verbier as well. But that's a great thing. That's why, there's 172 episodes already of the Ski Podcast, because there's so many different things that we can talk about and cover. In skiing. It's really exciting. So yeah, I'd love to thank you, Katie and Tristan, for sharing all of that. And we're just going to move to the close now. Just briefly on the racing side of things, Team GB update. Towards the end of the season, Charlotte Banks picked up a double gold in the snowboard World Cup, which is pretty good for her. She kind of missed out on the World Champs, although she did get that Team World Champs medal. And as I'm guessing many listeners to the podcast will know, Michaela Schifrin set a new World Cup record. She picked up her 87th win. I can't recall if she's had her 88th yet, but she's certainly broken the record for all-time World Cup wins. I do enjoy feedback about the show. I love to know what listeners think. And if you have ideas for features, we've included a few of those before. So please contact me on social at The Ski Podcast, or by email, theskipodcast@gmail.com. We've had a few comments sent in since the last podcast. Liam Major, he's been working his way through every single podcast, and he says, I finally caught up with the podcast after starting from the first episode. The pods seem to get better and better as I progress through them. Once again, thanks for this brilliant podcast. I've truly learned a lot and will continue to listen. So thank you very much, Liam, and I'm glad you're up to date. Christian just said, keep up the excellent podding. The best place if you do want to review us is Apple Podcasts. It's a bit of a cliche, but it does help other people find us. And here's a couple of recent reviews. I'd like to thank Paul from Inside Morsey. And he said, I love this podcast. It's a shining light that gets me through the week. Informative, educational, and extremely interesting. Keep up the brilliant work. And Duncan SW said, Ian's a great host. Fantastic range of skiing topics and highly useful information on all sorts of things. Highly recommended. So there's 172 now episodes to catch up with. I was looking at the stats. I see over the last year, we've become more international. 57% of the listeners are in the UK. And the next biggest countries are the USA, Australia, France, and Canada. And there are a lot of other countries on that list. So please do let us know if you're listening from further afield. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you enjoy the podcast, you can always buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/the Ski Podcast. But for now, you can follow me at Skipedia, the podcast at the Ski Podcast. I'd like to thank the Three Valleys for sponsoring the show, and thank my guest today, Katie. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
And Tristan, thank you.
Thank you, Ian. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
And finally, listener, thank you for joining us. Until next time, goodbye.